there's. Nobody wants their conversations recorded, I guess. Secondly, are we expecting Arlen?
We are accepting Arlen. We have two noted absences.
Okay,
But we can proceed when it turns 4, which.
yeah, we need to go in just a second. I think 5 is actually a quorum.
Yeah. We have 9, so we have 9 members, so 5 constitutes our quorum. Oh.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started then. So questions for staff. Were commission members contacted to ensure a quorum?
Yes.
And was the meeting properly advertised and applicants notified?
Yes.
Were copies of COA applications and meeting minutes made available to commission members 5 days prior to the meeting?
Yes.
And were reasonable efforts made to identify and notify surrounding property owners and other interested parties for all COA applications?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we will go ahead and call this meeting to order, and I welcome everybody to this September 2024 meeting of the City of Greensboro Historic Preservation Commission. Are there any adjustments to the agenda that was published?
No.
All right, thank you. Well, then we will go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Jesse Arnett, and I'm the chair.
My name is Sharon Graber. I'm the vice chair. I'm somehow at large.
Eric Woodard, District 2.
Stephanie McGeary, City of Greensboro.
I'm Shaw from the City Attorney's Office.
Arlen Nichols, College Hill Historic District. Catherine Rowe, District 4.
Bert Vanderdeen Dudley.
All right, thank you, guys. It is the commission's job to review applications for certificates of appropriateness, called the COA, to ensure that changes in Greensboro's 3 locally zoned historic districts are congruent with the historic district design standards. In order to meet due process requirements under North Carolina law, anyone wishing to speak on an application must come to the podium to be sworn in, and their comments will be recorded for the meeting minutes. Decisions of the commission in granting or denying certificates of appropriateness may be appealed to North Carolina Superior Court within 30 days of the decision of this commission. So at this time, if there are any members of the audience who are planning to speak on any of the items on our agenda, if you could make your way to the podium and we'll swear everyone in. All right, if you'll raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thank you. You may be seated. Questions for commissioners. Did all commissioners receive their information packets?
Yes.
Okay. And do any commissioners have a conflict of interest with regard to any items on the agenda?
I think I think I have a conflict.
Okay. And that's 510 North Church Street. Okay. So when we get to that item, we can take a vote to accuse you. And have any commissioners discussed any applications prior to the meeting? Okay, all right, thank you. And I believe we have a couple of absences for the record.
We do. Deborah Kaufman and Tracy Pratt.
Okay, thank you. All right, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 28th, which
So
I guess.
there were no minutes sent to you this month. Please forgive me, with my retirement, I'm a little overloaded. I have not done July for you either. So I'm overdue and owe you all 2 months of minutes, but I promise to get back on track very soon.
You can be forgiven.
It's glorious reliving these meetings. You know, I really want to get to it. That's one.
All right, thank you. All right, so in that case, we will move on to our applications for certificates of appropriateness. And so the way this process works is that for each COA application on our agenda, the city staff will describe the application and make a recommendation, including the relevant design standards. Commissioners will be allowed to ask questions of city staff. Then those wishing to speak will be allowed in the following order. First, those in support of the application. Second, those in opposition to the application. The applicant will be given an opportunity to rebut statements made in opposition to the application. Rebuttal comments should pertain only as a response to comments made by testimony in opposition. Following that, I will close the public hearing, and then the commission will discuss the proposal with respect to its congruity with the historic district design standards and list evidence presented during the public hearing. Only competent material and substantial evidence may be considered. Evidence that falls into the category of hunches, rumors, speculations, and irrelevancies will be rejected, and the fact that the commission did not rely on this evidence will be noted for the record. I will then call for a motion of findings of fact. If a finding is made and adopted, the commission will then discuss imposing conditions. I will then call for a motion to approve with conditions, continue, or deny the application. After these two votes, we will move on to the next item. The applicant will receive a formal notification of the commission's vote. Audience members are welcome to leave after their item has been discussed or to stay for the remainder of the meeting. So the first item on our agenda is an application for 510 North Church Street.
That's correct, and this is an after the fact application. The location is 510 North Church Street. It's application number 2949. The applicant is Keith Crabtree. The property owner is Matthew Benfield. We received this on August 16th, 2024. And this is for the installation of commercial signs and 3 accessory structures. And bear with me as I work through kind of navigating the meeting differently from this location. This is the property site. This is a non-contributing, as you'll see in your staff comments. So I'm changing staff comments a little bit. We have traditionally recommended, and so it's a staff recommendation rather than the staff comment. And one of the concerns that we were discussing internally is that part of this meeting is that it's quasi judicial, which means that your decision is not only based on the information that's been provided to you, but also on testimony. So for staff to make a recommendation prior to hearing the testimony at the meeting, it's a little presumptuous. So we are going to be working on changing what the staff recommendation looks like. And when we bring in the new person, we're hopefully, going to kind of see how they functioned at their previous location, kind of learn from that. I've got some ideas, but for tonight's purposes, since we've already identified that as a little bit of an issue, instead of recommending, I'm using the word support. And I just wanted to explain to you all the background behind that slight change. So
Stephanie, I'm sorry to interrupt you before you get into it. I forgot that we do need to take a vote to recuse Bert for this item. So
thank you.
can somebody make a motion?
I make a motion that Bert Vanderveen be recused for this session of the meeting. Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, Bert.
Thank you.
okay. So in your staff comments, this is a non-contributing structure in the Fisher Park Historic District. It is a commercial property. As I mentioned, it is after the fact. You can see one of the after the fact additions here. There's a sign on the front of the building here, and then a freestanding sign here. There's also 2 other accessory structures back behind the building that are not easily seen from the street. And so as staff, we are supporting this application. Generally, it's supporting the application and believe that it is congruous with the standards under the introduction on page 4, the accessory structures and garages on page 36, and signs on page 34. As I mentioned, there are 3 accessory structures behind this building. In size, measured in feet, they are 12 by 20, 12 by 16, and 8 by 8. They are separated by 5 feet, which is standard and required per zoning code. The combined total square footage of the 3 accessory structures is actually within the allowable size for city zoning code. So there is a stipulation that with accessory structures, it has to be no more than 33% of, and it's a calculation, the square footage of the primary structure. This is well under that criteria. So from that perspective, it's allowable. The structures are separated by 5 feet. Oh, sorry, that's a repeat. The only concern that we had, that I had as staff, is that that's like 25 years of a we there that you just heard instead of an I. Is this red door here? And that's one of the reasons why I want to reference the section in the introduction. And we intentionally wrote this section years ago when we redid the guidelines to allow for flexibility in terms of commercial and institutional properties, and allow them to do things that we might not ordinarily allow, like have 3 accessory structures at the back of a property, but this is a commercial building, they need that for storage, so we understand that need. However, having the accessory structure with a bright red door visually draws attention to it. And so the language in the introduction on page 4 is the guidelines allow for change when it is accomplished in a sensitive manner that maintains the special character of the historic district while meeting the practical needs of the residents and property owners. And then going further in that section, buildings in the historic districts can be quite different from one another, yet they have a common denominator. They exist within a locally zoned historic district with the shared goal of maintaining and preserving the character and spirit of the historic neighborhood. So you'll see in the conditions that I will address what I'm talking about right now. So I want to move on quickly to the signs. See, we have 2 signs that have been installed. The first sign is wood, and that is this freestanding sign right here at the front of the street. It's properly located for a freestanding sign in the historic districts. We don't govern the color or the messaging on signage. We only look at the style of the sign, and this meets that framework. See, and this sign measures 4 feet by 5 feet. The second sign is attached to the building facade, which is also in keeping with what we allow. And it is 4 feet by 4 feet. They are not internally illuminated, so that is a positive that meets the standards. The only thing I don't know is what that material of the sign that's attached to the building. So we'll want to find that out from the applicant or their speaker. So moving forward into deciding which standards, let me show a few more pictures here real quick. So you can see the other 2 smaller units back there. And here are the accessory structures and garages standards. So design new garages and outbuildings to be compatible with the main structure in the lot, and material design using existing historic outbuildings in the districts as example. New garages and standard 4, new garages and accessory buildings should be located in rear yards and not past the center line of the house. And then standards on page 34. This is a lot to read. Introduce unobtrusive single signage in the historic districts. Number 2, new signs should be no larger than necessary to identify the building they serve and located so that they do not block pedestrian views along the street. 3, select traditional materials for new signs, including wood, metal, stone, and masonry. Carved or sandblasted sign boards are generally not appropriate in the historic districts. Signs should be painted and may be lighted with concealed spotlights. 4, an appropriate location for a freestanding sign in a residential area is close to the front walk and near the public sidewalk. 5, billboards, outdoor advertising signs, and other tall freestanding signs, portable signs, flashing or lighted message, plastic signs, signs with internally illuminated letters are not appropriate in the historic districts. 6, it is not appropriate to attach signs to a building in any manner that conceals, damages, or causes the removal of architectural features or details. 7, signage should be compatible with the original use of a building. A, it is not historically appropriate to install signs directly on facades or porch roofs of residential buildings in those buildings originally intended for residential use. The installation of a freestanding sign is most appropriate as it is less likely to detract from the architecture of the building. B, place signs for historic commercial buildings in locations originally intended for signage, such as the top of the storefront or on windows, doors, or awnings. C, signage for new commercial buildings should reflect similar placement to that of historic commercial buildings in the neighborhood. And as a reminder, the reason I just read all of that into the record is because this is a quasi judicial commission. And when our decisions are appealed, it is appealed on the record. So it is always best to have these standards clearly in the minutes so that when the reviewer at the appeal level is looking at the minutes, they have them right in front of them. So I don't want you all to think that I was just making you listen to my voice. So our conditions for this meeting is to approve with a condition, as I mentioned earlier, with the requirement that the units are in a neutral palette, that the red door is painted in a neutral color so it doesn't draw attention from the street. And that's my first staff assessment.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Does anybody have any questions?
Stephanie, can you zoom in closer on the image of the front so we can see the signs?
Yeah, let me see if we can do that. Let me see.
The way on the bottom right, you see that bar?
Oh, yes, thank you. Do you want me to go more? And I think this is a temporary sign as well. We'll have to hear testimony on that.
Steph, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna also ask you, in your reading, you talked about buildings that were originally residential. Was this building originally residential? Do we know?
I think it's always been an office building. It's non-contributing. It's got that mansard style roof that kind of reads like office.
My question, I was a little surprised when I saw this application that this particular parcel was even in the historic district, and looking at the map, I see that it's in the local district, but not in the National Register district, which is kind of an unusual condition. Lots of times it's the other way around. So I wondered if you had any insight into the history of that.
Well, we were actually talking about that earlier today. So typically with the National Register districts, they want the highest percentage of historically contributing structures. And this, being on the fringe of the district boundary, is very easy to carve out for that National Register district. For local district, they're looking at more clean boundaries. And so following that railroad track as that edge between Fisher Park and Dunleith was likely the reasoning behind going all the way down. And there's another structure to the left of this building as well, and structures across the street.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers my question. Do we know, I mean, yeah, I agree that this building looks like it would have always been commercial, but it also looks perhaps newer than the district.
Right.
Do we know anything about the history there? I've always been curious about that little segment of Lethwich Street and the little piece that's on the other side of the tracks.
I don't know anything about this other than it would have been there, it does predate the establishment of the districts.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, any other questions for staff? All right, do we have the applicant here to speak? All right.
Mr. Garnett, my name's Brad Gardner.
All right, yes,
Have you come right up there?
Sure.
yeah,
I was not sworn because I represent KC's and Mr. Crabtree, but I'd be happy to be sworn.
sure, yeah, if you could first give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Brad Gardner and my address is 1904 Ray Alexander Drive in Greensboro,
All right, and,
2741.
okay, thank you, and do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, you may go ahead.
I'm here with Ms. Rebecca Hogan. She's the office administrator for KC's. This building came to our possession through a commercial lease that began last year. And I'm interested in Mr. Arnett that you correctly reasoned that you were surprised to find that this was within the district. So was KC's. We're just not aware of that until a visit from the inspector. And hence, that's why this application is occurring now and not long ago. Certainly, we have been instructed by Mike, the inspector's office, that the real issues, if any, left standing are the signs. He is related to folks for KC's that, it's his view that the buildings were moved and they're appropriate. And I took down some notes regarding this door issue that I think certainly can be addressed. Ms. Logan's with me. She can answer any questions you have. We've only been in that property for just over a year.
All right, thank you. Do you know One of the questions that came up is whether that sign in the yard is temporary or permanent.
I would defer to Rebecca on that. The other question that came up was trying to, or someone raised the question of the material, one of the sense, no.
Metal is this material on the building.
Yes.
Okay,
As far as the permanency or temporary status of the sign,
and so we'll give you a chance to
Okay.
emphasize it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Ms. Logan, you can come forward. If you'll give us your name and address for the record.
My name is Rebecca Logan. I'm actually in a campsite. My physical driver's license address is 3116 Spring Meadow Drive, in Snellville, Georgia. I've relocated to the area, so I haven't found camper life right now, so.
All right, and we'll need to swear you in too.
Yes.
So do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
All right, I do, thank you.
as you say, the sign on the front is metal, the wooden sign in the yard is wooden, it is not a permanent structure, it can be removed, but it is tacked down for, not easy removal.
The reason I noted that is because of the base, it has sort of that temporary. Do you all have intentions of replacing that with a more permanent sign that might have like a brick base or something?
I mean, we could certainly look at that, I mean, we were a construction and remodel company, so we could easily make those adjustments, but at this point, we hadn't made it. Plans to do that because we're awaiting the certificate of appropriateness, making sure we move forward, but if that's suggested, we can certainly look into that for sure.
Okay.
And as I said, we have that area, it's tacked down in a way that the usual passerby or someone couldn't remove it, it would not be easy to remove as it is, but it can be removed just as we place it.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
The issue came up earlier about the possibility of painting the red door on the storage a different color.
I don't think that would be a problem at all. I think it's just the color that it was purchased with, so I think if that was a factor, we could very easily correct that.
Well, and that's good to hear. I was concerned that maybe it was done to be in the business.
No,
Colors.
although I wouldn't put it past him, but he's big on branding, but no, I think he may have bought it because it had a red door. But no, I'm sure that's not a problem.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Okay. Is there anyone here to speak in opposition? All right, well, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing on this item and turn it over to commissioners. So we have two issues to discuss, one being the signs and the other being the outbuildings. So why don't we start with the signs?
Well, I couldn't tell from the photo what Stephanie is talking about the base. It sounds like there might be, so I don't have a strong opinion on that. I'm just wondering if they did decide to do something differently, should that be something staff approves?
So normally, we would have likely approved the majority of this work at staff level. We might have probably recommended a few different directions on these particular choices, but overall, it's something that regularly gets approved at staff. So they could come back if they wanted to do a more permanent monument sign. We could definitely work with them at staff level.
Yeah, and I guess, from what I can tell from the picture, it is hard to see because it's in shadow. It looks like it has kind of some angled wood brackets at the base,
Exactly.
and that's what you're referring to as being a little bit more temporary in character.
Right, and normally we would see some sort of base with the sign fixed to the top of that base. So this is slightly different in style, but the temporary nature of it, it goes in that realm of our purview if it's temporary.
I guess that would be my, comment, that if it is temporary, then its current arrangement or setup is fine, but I would like to see, something that feels more substantial.
Right, I agree. That we would like to see them come back with a more typical monument sign.
Okay, any other thoughts on the signage? Certainly, other than that one issue seems reasonable and appropriate to me for the building and the setting.
So, it could be a condition of our decision that a more permanent base would be, and that could be worked out with staff.
Yeah, I think I would be comfortable with not being any more specific than that. I don't think it needs to be anything elaborate. Okay, and then we have, the other item to consider is the sheds, and so I think we've, you know, Stephanie brought up the issue of the color of this door, and I suppose the other items for us to consider, you know, as if we were considering any other outbuilding, is whether their general placement on the property is appropriate for the historic district. We've heard testimony that they meet all the relevant zoning guidelines. So, y'all's thoughts?
The siding seems, I mean, we can't even see two of them, and I would agree that the red door does draw your attention to the one shed that is visible. But it seems like they're at the back of the site, just, you know, the way that we would want them to be.
And it's also in our purview because we are telling them what color we're staying in neutral. So we
Right.
can do that.
So that's a good point. So we don't require a certificate of appropriateness for someone to change the color of their already painted property. However, it is still within the commission's purview to regulate color. That is just a choice that we made in our standards because it had become sort of a routine approval process. We weren't making people change the color that they wanted to paint their house. However, at the commission level, when color can be used to help mitigate concerns, then it's absolutely in your purview. And in this case, drawing less attention to the accessory structure would be that goal.
I'll put in there my opinion, the red doesn't bother me. And I think for the reasons that the specific location of this specific structure, you know, I already expressed my surprise that this was even the historic district to begin with. It's at the rear property abutting the railroad tracks. Actually, the red does work with the company branding, and you know, I guess my personal opinion is that if that door was brown, it doesn't really fundamentally change the nature of what the structure as a whole is.
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to point out one thing. The lease term expires at some point in 2025. And I think Casey's is trying to determine whether they're gonna remain there or not. So if there were a condition imposed, which I sense is the view at this meeting, I would just ask that that would coincide with the need to sign a new lease, so that we're not forced to put in a permanent sign unless we wind up not being there very long. We're talking about a matter of several months.
Yeah, so we could absolutely address that as a condition that they come back they come back for a COA once their lease terms are negotiated.
Okay. Is it, but is it Casey's intention to re-sign the lease as opposed to?
Undetermined, there are issues with the building inside the building, plumbing and HVAC and other things like that, that they're trying to work out with the landlord and the property manager and so forth. They just moved, and in a perfect world, they'd stay. I'm not sure we're living in that perfect world there right now. Obviously also, Mr. Chairman, the red door situation, getting that painted, thankfully, this is where it's nice to represent a general contractor,
Mhm.
that's not gonna be any problem at all.
Do you know exactly, what time frame for the renewal of the lease, is it like,
I do not, ma'am, but I can get that to you very quickly.
okay?
And the accessory,
I probably can get it for you before the end of the meeting.
and the accessory structures were added by KC? Is that
Yes.
right, and owned by your company?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you vacate, if you were to not renew the lease, is it your intention to remove them and take them to your next
Okay.
location?
All of
Yes,
this
it
is
is.
actually potentially temporary.
Okay.
And I apologize if this was information that you and Mike Cowley from our office discussed. I kind of took over towards the end of all of this, so I hate if you've had to repeat any information.
No problem, no problem.
All right, thank you for sharing that. That's helpful information.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Commissioners, does that testimony have any effect on your thoughts on this application?
I certainly feel that a more permanent base for the sign should not be required unless they are.
I agree.
And I would just be curious how other commissioners feel about the red paint, since we now know what our chair thinks.
I feel that if we have a chance to support the standards, this is an easy chance to support the standards, painting it in a neutral palette with a business that can, without a can of paint, in 5 minutes and get it done. So I think we should support the standards on the red door part and change it to neutral.
I would agree with that.
I guess my question to that would be where in the standards is that?
Let's see.
Commissioner, Mr. Gardner may have something relevant.
Oh, sorry.
I do, just to answer your question, man, the current lease term expires July 31st of 2025.
So you could cite that date in your condition,
Okay.
July 31st, 2025.
Thank you.
7:31.
Yeah, I mean, the question was asked, where in the listed?
Right, so in my review, what I cited for that is in that introduction section on page 4. And I don't have it in front of me, but there's a pretty extensive section that's called the application of the guidelines or standards. And that whole section was created with the purpose of taking into account the special needs of commercial and institutional buildings, while also making sure that they still maintain, that integrity of the character of the overall district. So when I was looking at the details of this and when I drove by, that red door really called to my attention. So if we're looking at trying to diminish the visibility of accessory structures, particularly one that is really kind of a design and style that we might not have necessarily approved. We are kind of iffy on our prefabricated storage buildings in the districts, and trying to allow that building to stay and lessen its impact is where I was coming from.
Yeah, and I think just to make clear where I'm coming from, on the devil's advocate side is that, in all my time on the commission, we've never really, we've taken the position that we don't regulate color. And so I guess, and I understand your reasoning for, the ability to invoke that, that it is technically within the purview and the ability to invoke that if a color choice did, threaten to diminish the overall character of the historic district. I mean, I appreciate that clarification. I guess my own personal opinion is I don't feel like this rises to that threshold of kind of stepping across this issue that we don't normally get involved with. It's not like we're talking about painting a prominent landmark house hot pink or something like that. Again, just all my opinion, but to me, I look at this as it's a non-contributing commercial structure on the boundary of the historic district, and we're talking about an outbuilding. Those are the reasons why the red doesn't bother me.
But there's also the issue that at some point, non-contributing structures can be reevaluated and become contributing.
That's true.
So we have.
I mean, we can take that into consideration. In full disclosure, we have no intention
I know.
of doing an update of Fisher Park, but yeah, that's true. And depending on the construction date of this, if it's, if it's a 70s or 60s structure, it would fall within that 50-year time frame.
By the way, I did try to pull up MLS to go back into the realist files and go try to find the tax card, and the mobile app won't let me go that far back. I could only see that to 2007.
Oh, wow.
That said, if you guys, and I'm thankful for the applicant indicating their willingness to work with that and, and saying that it would not be a big issue at all to repaint this door. And if that's, the wishes of the commission, I'm more than happy to go along with that. I just wanted to kind of, state my reasons. So, would somebody like to make a motion?
Okay. And just before I start, if you've already read all of these, can I just cite the numbers of the standards?
Since we are, well,
Mr. Gardner, if you can confirm with the applicant, would you all be willing to agree that this has already been read into the record? Is it going to be incorporated?
Yes, of course, that's perfectly fine.
and typically, when we repeat them in the motion is when we are planning to deny an application.
Okay. I move that based upon the facts presented in application number 2949 and the public hearing, the Greensboro Historic Preservation Commission finds that the proposed project is not incongruous with the Historic District Program Manual and Design Standards. And that staff comments based on comments from the introduction on page 4, the section on accessory structures and garages, page 36, and signs on page 34. I guess I just stated those. The standards would be under on page 36, standards 2 and 4, and on page 34, standards 1 through 7. And also a reference to the introduction to the standards on page 4. And the following facts for discussion that this is a non-contributing structure in the historic district, that the accessory structures are sited appropriately at the rear of the property, and that the location of the signage conforms with signage guidelines for commercial properties in the historic district. Are acceptable as finding of fact, therefore. Stop there.
All right. All right,
Myself.
we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
seconded by Sharon. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Therefore, I move that the Greensboro Historic Preservation Commission approves application number 2949 and grants a certificate of appropriateness to Keith Crabtree for work at 510 North Church Street with the following conditions. And those conditions would be that the color of the red door on the storage building that is visible from the street be painted out in a neutral color. And second, that if the lease is renewed on July 31st, 2025, that the applicant construct a more permanent base for the sign in the front yard.
Question, do we need to specify anything with regards to neutral paint color, or just leave it there?
So there.
I think that's generous.
Legal suggested, I'm sorry, I shouldn't call you legal. Brent suggested, color, neutral color in consultation with staff. I'm fine.
That's
with
perfect.
that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Neutral color in consultation with
Yes.
staff. Yes. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that application is approved with conditions. All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Sharon.
Sharon. Well, it's East State Grad, it's been a rough month for the red and white, we came in on the red garage door.
Make a motion, I'd like to make a motion that Bert be allowed to rejoin.
Yeah, thanks.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Okay, thank you.
Go get them.
Oh, he left.
He's gone. And that was Sharon who made that, right? And that was unanimous.
All right, we'll let Bert get back in here. Welcome back, Bert.
Thank you.
All right, our next application is for 621 Walker Avenue, Wafco Mills condos.
Right, and so this is continued from last month. We had a pretty extensive discussion last month and we requested some additional information from the applicant, which is the Wafco Mills Homeowners Association. And this is application 2941. And the property, the applicant, like I said, is Wafco Mills Condominium Association Incorporated. The property owner is Leisha, I'm not sure if I said her first name correctly, Windsor. She's the secretary of the association, and we received this on July 25th, 2024. And the application, as you may remember, and again, I apologize, we didn't have minutes for you to review that discussion, but we'll be repeating a little bit of it this evening. It is to install a dumpster enclosure at the end of Walker Avenue. And so the intent is not necessarily for a dumpster to be in this location. It's also trash cans. They're having some issues, as they explained last month, with the other Wafco condo complex. Are two separate entities, and they've kind of separated how their waste management plan is handled. And the homeowners association did some research. At last month's meeting, we asked, is this the only place? And we heard testimony of what other areas they investigated. What they provided to us this month is actually a map and a written description of what they did review in determining this site location. So I will first just run through some of these pictures to remind everyone. Let me see what's up. Oh, I've got this on. I wondered why it was off. So sorry. Let's get the scale back down again. So here's the site, and where the silver and red car is, on the other side of those vehicles, this is where the proposed new enclosure will be located. It uses up 2 parking spaces. There's units here of residences and units on this side as well. Oops. This is the location from Cedar Street, so there's already a hedge in place there. More visual of what that hedge is like. And these are the plans that were provided. So you can see what the building looks like. And at last month's meeting, you know, as I said, after some lengthy discussion, we talked about what is really in the purview of the commission. So, you know, you're looking at the siding, the location of this, you're looking at the materials and the design of that enclosure. You're looking at what is visible from the public right of way, so that would be Cedar Street. And you're also thinking about how the residences interact with where this proposal is cited. So all things to take into consideration. I know it's hard to really read these types of plans when they're up on a screen like this. And here's just some, I don't remember why Mike included this anymore, I'm sorry. Here is the new information that has been provided to us. And in your packet, there was a black and white depiction of this, and then an explanation where they described where they looked at some other areas. And so the alternative area that they looked at had the potential of removing 5 parking spaces versus the 2. There was an issue with the type of pavement that was in place, that the feedback from the city's waste management group was that the garbage trucks over time would deteriorate that pavement. And we did hear all of this in testimony last month. So they put this down on paper. And so they are continuing with this request of citing it in this pink area. I did want to include with this month, and this is one of those things, I don't know if some of you heard me say that I hear from Mike more since he's retired than when he was still working. And I got a text from him today and he said, Stephanie, we should maybe show other multifamily units in the districts. And so I grabbed quickly some examples of other multifamily. This isn't a perfect solution. It's a difficult situation. It is a multifamily, new construction, non-contributing development in College Hill. Here is actually a historic, this is Cannon Court on Elm Street in Fisher Park. It is a contributing historic structure. They've got cans back here. They've got this dumpster. Here's a residence here. And on this side of Hendricks is a historic apartment complex as well, that those windows look right on that dumpster. So ideal, but not ideal, excuse me, but kind of restricted on where to put that necessity. And then here's another example of where they used individual cans. And this is at Winburn Court. Yeah, but this is off of Edgar Alley. So this is a really ideal situation and the whole intent of having a historic alley in place. We've got these individual cans, which again, is not maybe the best, but at the same time, it's not visible from the public right of way.
Oh, what's interesting is that used to have, they
There
used to have
are still-
dumpsters,
they're
are they
still
still
there.
back there?
Yeah, they're to the right, there are
Okay.
2 big dumpsters.
Yeah,
Okay, and so we're hearing from the audience that there's some dumpsters back in this area
okay.
as well too.
So they've gotten rid of them and.
So just
moved
a-
the cans. Okay.
And just a few examples of it being a very complex situation. For our staff, you know, analysis, we are recommending in support of this, with some, here we go. You know, with some conditions, and we're citing fences, walls, and site features, pages 24 through 27. As I mentioned, a dumpster and trash can enclosure is proposed for Wafco Mills condominiums. The enclosure will be constructed out of brick with doors that fully enclose the receptacles. The proposed location is the end of an existing parking area that abuts Cedar Street. However, the dumpster enclosure will not be in a rear yard or behind a building and will be visible from the street. Existing hedges and additional screening should be maintained and added to buffer visibility from Cedar Street and neighboring residential buildings, and standards on page 26, number 1. Place miscellaneous items such as swimming pools, playground equipment, concrete paths, and basketball goals, tree houses, dumpsters, and trash receptacles only in areas such as rear yards where they are not visible from the street. And 2, trash receptacles and dumpster areas must be adequately screened from view of the public right of way and adjoining residents with shrubs and or fencing. And so the condition that we are recommending is that the landscape hedging that is already in place that we saw in the images is maintained and more is installed. 3 sides of it would be nice, just the sides that aren't the doors that have to come open to help block the view from the street and residential units.
I'm sorry, can you say that very last thing again? Sorry.
Let me just read the whole thing. So that landscape hedging is installed or maintained, because there is already some in existence,
Yeah.
on 3 sides of the structure to block the view from the street and residential units. It is very close quarters back
It
in
is.
there.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that can be done to mitigate like the visual impact through landscaping, it's something for the commission to consider.
Can you go back to the image with the hedge?
That's it. And that's a very nice, that detailing with the brick columns and the hedges in between is a nice landscaping feature.
All right, any other questions for staff?
Can you just orient me? You said part of the location for the dumpster, the hedge exists. I'm unclear looking at this image where the dumpster will be in relation.
Right.
It's on the,
It's on the
There's
other
some on
side,
the
so
other
let me
side.
show
So it's
you.
alongside of the dumpster
So
that
here's
would
right
be.
here, and then when we look. So this is the interior side of
Okay.
Wafco, where those 2 cars are parked there. Oh, let me go up one more. So the dumpster, from what I understand, will basically be in front of these 2 cars, or might even be in those 2 parking
It's
spaces.
on this side of
actually.
the 2 trees.
it is, so right
Yeah,
now.
so
it's-
Joe, if you look at this site plan here, that street view of the hedge is taken pretty much from the word south in South Cedar Street.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So right now, it's like a nice little green space that they have like a doggy waste station and it's been kind of like a yard area for the folks that have the townhomes over here. But to your point, the hedge is very substantial, very beautifully maintained. So it will be very unobtrusive from the exterior of Wafco. So preserving that historic look and feel on that side. It just becomes, how to manage it.
On the interior
interior.
space, exactly.
So I just want to be sure, because now I'm looking at the drawing that I looked at before with, it shows where the dumpster will be, then those 2 trees, and then a little further back is where this existing hedge is. And you're saying that's part of what screens it from view from the public.
Right, I mean, already existing, that doesn't necessarily mean that more landscaping
Right,
be
now I
put in
understand,
place.
but we're looking at that as what's screening the long side of the back of the dumpster from the public right of way. Okay.
Exactly. That public right of way visibility is one of your areas of purview.
Yeah, and I'll say just by way of kind of framing the discussion coming up, that part of the discussion last month was that this is definitely one of the gray areas where it's the commission's job to interpret the standards as they relate to a particular condition. And as we look at these 2 standards on page 26, that calls for trash receptacles to be placed only in areas such as rear yards where they're not visible from the street. And also trash and dumpster areas must be adequately screened from view of the public right of way and adjoining residences. We discussed how those are kind of worded more with a single family property in view, and we have a unique condition here where You know, we have a public right of way that's kind of on the outside. But yeah, that's the rear of these units, and obviously very constrained location, so I just wanted to, you know, throw that context of the discussion from last month out there as something to think about as we hear testimony.
Definitely.
Yes,
That picture you have up there, right there, the building that's on the left. That's just, looks like a solid brick wall. Is that any doors on that wall right there? Or
I
is that,
believe it's a solid.
that's a solid right there?
Yes.
Okay, so the front door
But there
space.
are front doors
right
on
there.
this side
Okay.
here,
All right.
yeah.
So, one thing that sort of jumped out for me too. I mean, bless them, it's a challenge. I mean, to be able to figure out where to do this on the site. It seems that they've really been very thorough and diligent in looking at the different options for where it could go, and this really did seem like the place that makes the most sense. For the folks that are in those townhomes on the right-hand side, and a little bit for the folks over on the left. I think one thing, perhaps, and I don't know if it's within our purview, I think it likely is, I'm just trying to envision people coming and bringing the trash there, and there's lighting that they're referencing, which is motion detecting fixtures monitored by cameras. So hopefully it can be done in a way that's inobtrusive, doesn't really do, for the folks that are living on this side in particular. I don't know if we can speak to that or get more details on.
Yeah, I think at this point, it would probably be good for us to go ahead and hear the testimony from the public, and then we can weigh all of that as we, you know, discuss this. All right, any other questions for staff before I move on? All right, well, do we have the applicant here to speak? Give us your name and address for the record.
I'm Joy Watson. I live at 909 West Wendover Avenue. I have, the unit that I own is actually in this building, down from that end. And what questions can I answer?
I think if you could walk us through, because you know, you shared a lot with us last month, but if you could walk us through, Stephanie, that slide with the alternatives that were evaluated, and just kind of tell us about the different locations that were considered and why the one on the application was selected as the best one.
Sure. Okay, so for those, this is the Walker Avenue comes down from here. Fulton is up there at the top, and then Cedar is the hedge that was in that photograph. It is right along here at the bottom, going along Cedar. The current dumpsters that we have been using for historic Wafco are down here, that are just exposed and have been exposed in the purview for decades and just trashing up everything, looking terrible. So we considered this spot here at the end of, this is a building right here. This is on Wafco Lane. We looked at areas all along in here. We could not do anything inside this Wafco Lane, which goes around and then out here onto Cedar, due to when we met with the waste management people from the city of Greensboro, they discouraged us from doing that because of the damage to our asphalt. We have this asphalt parking lot that is on the to-do list in the next 3 years to resurface that, but we did not want that to deteriorate faster because it is a really expensive project. And also at the end of this building here, there is actually a window on the end of this building, whereas this building here does not have a window on the end of it. There are units here, but the trash dumpster will be set back far enough that it would be, it's not it's past where the building is, so it's not like the people that are in this building will be looking out over the trash dumpster, because the dumpster is actually further back than where that building begins. And originally, we had planned to put it here, that was our first pick, and because of just keeping it inside. Putting it down here, or at the end of this building, there's 5 parking places, we have 66 units. We already don't have enough we don't have enough parking places for all 66 units to have one assigned space and a random space, so parking is at a premium, and we have met with our membership. We have 4 of our 5 board members in favor of putting it here.
Well, and also just to clarify, and if it's helpful, I had clients recently that I helped them sell one of the townhomes right there on the left. And so I think you probably took this into your, just as you were looking at how to consider this and how it affects these folks. Most of them have just a stoop in the front and steps that go down to the parking. But really what they have on the back side here is private space, courtyards that back up to Spring Garden, and they have sort of little gated spaces.
On this unit, yes.
Correct, to the left.
Mhm.
And so it does, at least they would still, even though I'm sure they probably aren't crazy or potentially about having the trash, the new facility here, they still have that lovely area in the back that's also shielded and hedged from Spring Garden as well.
We have met with we did have a meeting with all the owners, and we had a meeting, and we had a lot of really positive feedback. We also plan on putting screening and landscaping around. We want to have some lighting just to prevent unauthorized dumping, as has been the case for the historic dumpsters, and that trash mess down there, we don't want to duplicate it. And we are really hoping and praying that when this greenway goes in, that those dumpsters will be addressed, and we really wish that the historic preservation would have some jurisdiction over that mess, because everybody that lives in every one of these units here has had to look out to these dumpsters, and they're it's awful.
And who owns those?
Historic Wafco Mills,
So the other.
Wafco Mills.
Yellow, these are the yellow buildings, right?
No, that is Walker Commons.
Okay, that's right.
Historic
That's right.
Wafco is the actual mill building that's there on the corner of McGee and Cedar.
Okay.
And they are the ones that own those dumpsters, and those are that we did try to, for a significant, over 2 years, have been trying to work out an agreement with them to clean up that lot with those dumpsters, and we were unable to come to a resolution for the maintenance of that parking lot, and they just refused. They
Are those dumpsters screened?
are not screened. They are not. They are just out there wide open, looking trashy.
I think they're outside.
They are outside the historic district.
Yeah, they might be outside the historic district,
Okay.
but they might be in violation of the city zoning.
Yeah, and people do, they don't.
It's
Other
a trash
there's
mess.
there is unauthorized dumping
It's a
there,
ton of
furniture
unauthorized
and other
dumping over there.
things.
It is a trashy mess, and I will, like, as an owner there, the owners there at Wafco Mills are unwilling to pay $150 an hour for someone to clean that up every week. That's really the bottom line, and Historic Wafco is unwilling to monitor that or clean that up unless we were paying $150 per hour.
You get back on track.
So, yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question. Joy, in the description based on staff, it says that the enclosure will be constructed out of brick with doors that will fully enclose the receptacles. but I don't see any brick on the line drawings.
I don't, we will not be able to use brick, I do not believe, because this area here is some type of an easement for the city. And so what we have discussed with the contractors that we've been working with is making the screening something, we have iron, we have some fencing that's iron, we have some wood decks, and we will make it out of materials that will complement what we already have, something to blend in, and we are looking at possibly doing some type of a mural on the front to make it blend in more, make it blend in with what we already have and make it attractive.
But there will be doors.
There will be doors, there will be doors, it will be enclosed. And we want to have, like, we want to have swinging doors so that we can, if we have bulk items in there or trash cans, they can be rolled out. But we want to have a pedestrian door that we can also control who is going in and out with their garbage.
And when you spoke with the city of Greensboro Waste Management folks, you discussed the door situation with them specifically and in detail, because
Yes, I will say that when we,
Before, I just want to gently remind the board, obviously, anybody who gives factual testimony can only speak to their own personal knowledge, their own understanding. If I start hearing things like so-and-so said blank, that's hearsay evidence. So I want to gently remind everyone in the room of that, so.
yeah, do we have anybody here from City of Greensboro Waste Management?
No, we don't.
So
Oh,
the applicant can maybe give.
we did talk to Waste Management, we're doing what they told us to do.
Yeah.
Or what they recommended.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to get off track. Sometimes it's like with our trash cans within College Hill. We worked really, really hard to get the right design and get the right materials and all of those things, but somehow, you have to be able to work with the city folks so that there's an understanding on how things get emptied so that receptacles do not get
Well, and there was
damaged.
testimony
Yes.
last month to that effect about patterns of access. And actually, I think one of the drawings on here references the entrance and turnaround of that. And I'll also add that, you know, there are standards in the zoning ordinance that govern dumpster enclosures. So I think that, you know, as the specifics of that are outside of our purview, I think it's probably safe for us to assume that this design conforms with those standards. All right, any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else here to speak in support of this application? Okay, do we have anyone here to speak in opposition? All right. Decide who wants to go first? All right, if you could give your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Zane Kasabi, 6091 Windsor Farm Road, Summerfield, North Carolina. And I'm owner of unit 620B in Wafco.
All right, thank you.
And I did have some supporting information.
Yeah, what would you like me to pull up?
Well, I believe I sent 4 or 5 different units, but before we start, I would like to make a comment on this before you pull those up. We came before you a month ago, and we were granted a continuance to go back to the community and discuss options. That's what I recall. And unfortunately, our board of directors requested another meeting for September, this meeting, before they had an opportunity to meet with our homeowners association community and discuss options. The meeting did take place after you received the request and granted the presence here today. And during that meeting with our homeowners association, several options were brought up that had not been previously discussed. So I want to say that this information about options is not necessarily in good faith. So, I did go back to the city of Greensboro and, and had some email correspondence with the person who's in charge of the trash for Wafco Mills. And I have the email copy of our correspondence, question and answer directly from him. And in that, we reviewed the discussion that we had on options for Wafco Mills. And there were 3 areas of location that we discussed. One is the present location at Walker. One is the location where we are currently servicing our trash with cans. And the third is at the corner of Cedar and Wafco Lane. And all of those areas were determined as accessible and serviceable by the city of Greensboro. And it's an official correspondence with them.
So, and then, oh, do you want me to talk or do you want to talk?
Go ahead.
So what we were discussing earlier, so you have an application before you today with a proposal and you need to judge that application on its merits. If there are additional options available, we would need to see those as a new COA application for you all to consider. And that is up to your discretion if you would like to continue this first application and ask again for the applicant and community to have discussions that fully discuss all of the potential options. Or you can move forward with your review of this application tonight and approve it with conditions or deny it. But what we want to refrain from, and this isn't against your proposal, you are not in the position to be able to dramatically change the approval of this application to look like any other options that are presented in this discussion. So we're hearing that there are other alternatives out there that haven't really fully been discussed, is the testimony we're hearing, and that's something for you to take into consideration. And I am going to quickly show those alternatives just to be fair to our speaker, and then you all will need to make a decision about continue, approve with condition, or deny.
Right, and I think summarize too, and anybody from last month, feel free to add or correct to this, but my recollection of the reason why we asked for the slide with the alternatives that were examined was because our job here is to consider whether this application, as drawn in the location shown on the application, meets the intent of the design standards. And as has already been stated, this is a very difficult case that's not so cut and dry according to the language in the standards. And so we asked for more detail on why the proposed location was chosen to be the one that met the standards. But I agree, like our role here tonight is not to select the best alternative out of a menu of choices.
Right. So that's what I was coming back to say, and you know how I harp about training. So this is something that you learn in training. It's not always about you approving the best option. It's you approving the option that meets the standards. And that is frustrating when we see this with sometimes our architects on the commission, they know there's a better design out there, but that's not what you've been presented with. And you've been presented with a project that you have to weigh against the standards.
Right, so getting back to that, so since this gentleman is here to speak against, and he is a property owner,
Right.
and therefore that goes towards standing, which is one thing that we've been discussing recently. Knowing that the email back and forth will be inadmissible in this meeting, in this format, we can still hear his testimony and.
I would say the board is certainly free to hear the gentleman's testimony, if he wants to speak to an alternative or something of the sort. The one point that I was trying to drive home with regard to the emails and the statement that I made previously regarding this notion of, well, what did the city employee say? We don't have a city employee here to testify. So I think it's sufficient to say, folks have had conversations with the city, have come away with differing senses perhaps of what options are out there. And that's probably about as far as you can push that, because again, we're not gonna sit here and look at, I would recommend that the board not take into consideration emails and what have you with a city employee or some sense of what a city employee said when that city employee is not present to be able to really lay out for us.
Right, and I think that goes to education also and helping people as they come before our body to understand that if they want to be able to have something admissible, that if it's a collaboration with another individual, then that individual needs to be asked to be here so that they can also be sworn in if it's relevant. I'm sorry.
Well, before I'm just gonna jump in, because we were here last meeting, we're really tasked with a very specific thing.
Right.
Would this fit within this purview? It is historically correct. It meets the standards on page 26 with the conditions of the landscaping. It is not a question of whether it should be a swimming pool or anything else like that. Whatever you're putting there has to meet these conditions.
We can only deal with what's in our
Yeah.
COA application.
And if we open up one of those emails, we're gonna go down a rabbit hole that we might not come back from in the same way. And I feel,
And you need to stay away.
Oh, I didn't recommend that at all.
yeah, I know, I'm just listening.
Just education overall in the discussion. So one thing that you could be mindful of is if you choose to approve this application or approve it with condition, it's really incumbent on the community to have these ongoing discussions and work out what they want. They might come back to us in the future with a COA that says, we have 4 proposals for you. Which would the commission like to see? But for you, we as a body can't get into the middle of, for lack of better phrasing, disagreements within the homeowner association.
Yeah, and I would like to say respectfully as to all who are going to speak on this application that that is outside of our purview. The operations of the HOA, the process is just simply outside of what we're able to discuss here. So I'd really like to ask you to refrain from any grievances about the process on that end, and please keep your comments simply to the design standards that have been referenced. And I'll be happy to read them again, because I know everybody doesn't have a copy of them in front of us like I do, but the standards that we as a commission will be using to evaluate this application come from page 26, which is the guidelines for fences, walls, and site features. And standard number 1 says place miscellaneous items such as swimming pools, playground equipment, concrete pads and basketball goals, tree houses, dumpsters, and trash receptacles only in areas such as rear yards where they are not visible from the street. And number 2, trash receptacle and dumpster areas must be adequately screened from view of the public right of way and adjoining residences with shrubs and or fencing. And to that end too, one of the fine points that we discussed about this site last week is that this portion of Walker Avenue that dead ends in the proposed dumpster location is not public right of way. It's privately owned.
So to go back to the testimony at hand, are we ready to move back to our opposition testimony?
Yes.
Okay, and I will pull up the documentation that you sent me today that will help explain his testimony that there are some alternate locations yet to have been explored.
Okay, thank you.
But you have stated that the dumpster is within the guidelines if it's properly screened. But I would take that to mean that the dumpster is within the guidelines if properly screened and there are no other options. We feel that there are other options, and that's why we're bringing this forward.
Well, like I said, we are asked to evaluate the application we have before us, the design and the location that we have before us as to whether it meets the requirements of being properly screened. So I would really ask you to keep your comments to that.
But we can talk about the dumpster being in the front yard of the property that visible from the public way, those are all in opposition to the regulations. And we are currently servicing our community with cans. We will not necessarily object to cans in lieu of a dumpster, and we would like the word dumpster prohibited from being used in our community. And so that is one of the things that we request, but we can look at.
That's outside of our purview, whether you guys use dumpsters or individual cans.
Right, so as I mentioned earlier, so if the commission decides to approve this application tonight, that's just the commission's approval that this can be constructed. Whatever your homeowners association bylaws are, that's a separate process for you guys to undertake. And hopefully, we want you all to work through that. It's just a fine line for us to get.
I understand that, but there are reasons why a dumpster is not desirable and adjacent to a property. And it's not just the visual aspect, it's the rodents and the vermin and the flies that come with that. And it is absolutely unacceptable to be in our community when we have another option.
Again, and I think I can only say this one more time before I'm gonna have to ask you to either get to your relevant testimony or to have a seat, because that is just, that's just beyond what we can consider here. And, and again, I mean, part of the reason why we cannot use testimony about conflict within the HOA as any kind of relevant thing. We have no idea, there are 66 units in here. We have no idea whose viewpoint represents the majority view of the HOA. And so, again, I would ask you please to limit your comments to the design in the application.
Okay, all right.
And I'm happy to pull up if you can you see that well enough to tell me which ones you'd like to speak on, which order? So the top one is called
Let's
the
look
trash.
at the top one
10.
first. This is what we have right now. We have cans being used. And what I'm showing here is a scale drawing that the cans fit in 2 parking spots and an optional bulk waste. What is being shown to you in the presentation, there is no area for bulk waste. And then this is a representation of a fencing that is to scale that would cover these trash cans in the area that we're servicing currently. So that option.
Yeah, we'll just go through them down the road if that works for you.
There's the cans we have now that are in 2 spots. And that represents the elevation and the plan that I just showed you.
And is that off Wafco Lane?
That's off of Walker, and this is Walker, right?
Right there to the left.
Walker.
That's Wafco Lane.
Zane, how do they get to the street for pickup?
The truck comes up Walker and it turns in here and stops. And then the operator brings each can to the truck, dumps it, puts them back, and then he back into Walker and then goes back out.
Which is just incidentally the way that it's done all throughout the College Hill Historic District, so.
And with the proposal now with the dumpster at the end of Walker, they would come down Walker and they would back up and also turn into this same area and leave forward going back toward Walker. So discussing damage to the pavement and so on would be exactly the same for both this option and the proposed option.
This I actually can't open these emails, so
Okay.
I can't open these
Okay,
emails.
that's fine. Those are the emails that we
Yes, I do want to, that's it.
discussed with James. And this one, we went out there, this is me standing with a tape 9 feet tall. That's the exact height of the doors that are shown on the presentation that you have in front of you. And the 22 feet is the exact width of the dumpster enclosure that is being proposed, and it's shown right there at the end of Walker. And we wanted you to get a feel for that scale and what that would do to our visual in our community right at the end of Walker. It would block the view through that landscape area, tree area, and very much distort the look or the historic look of our community. So that's drawn exactly to scale of what size we're looking at. And also I want to say that the edge of the enclosure to the building wall is 18 feet. So that gives you an idea of how close it is to the building. The mailboxes that you see on your plan are right here. And that would, there's a proposed doorway entry and rework of the sidewalk here in the enclosure. And I also wanted to note that it presents a safety issue where individuals could hide behind there or hide inside that enclosure. You could not see what's going on in there. We do have, we're on a main route along Walker from the bus station. We have a lot of transient folks walking up and down Spring Garden Street. So it could potentially present a problem for safety as well. But I do say it doesn't represent what we want to achieve in the historic districts. In Wafco Mills or in working with the historic district.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Are there others here to speak in opposition? Give us your name and address for the record.
Hi, I need to be sworn in.
Okay,
I'm Samantha Stewart. I live at 211 Tate Street.
all right, and do you swear that your testimony will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you.
So I'm here representing the College Hill Neighborhood Association, and I'm gonna do my best to truly stick to what is in front of you here today. It is our belief that this proposed design does not fit the historic district standards. Something that I don't think has been driven home here that I think is extremely important for the commission to think about is the slope and topography of Walker Avenue. That hasn't really been discussed. If you are standing at Walker Avenue all the way up to Mendenhall, the top of the street, and looking down the beautiful residential street of Walker Avenue, right there in the center of the street, directly where your eye goes, is where this dumpster would be located. And I really want you all to kind of visualize that because it is much more dramatic of a location because of the topography of that street than it's seeming like from the photos. So that's just a biggie I wanted to bring up that I don't think has been brought up yet. Secondly, oh yes,
Sorry, and that vantage point is standing where again?
right at the top of the street, Walker and Mendenhall, which is a key part of the historic district. That is the heart of the historic district. If you're turning left onto Walker from Mendenhall, the first thing your eye goes to, because the street, goes like this and your eye is drawn right to the center of this beautiful residential street, it's gonna be a dumpster. And again, I'm saying all this fully understanding this is a very challenging situation. We're really sorry they're having to deal with this, but we do not think that this meets the standards. For that reason, it's just a big one. Secondly, that elevation that you see from Walker is where that opening and closing of the dumpster is gonna be. I don't think that we're gonna be able to have adequate screening to protect the visibility, because I think if you go back to the exact standard saying that they should be in rear yards, not in front yards, I do think that the intent behind saying that is that you don't want it to be visible from the residential part of the neighborhood, and that is exactly what this would be. So I just wanted to drive that home, that this would really be like it's in the front yard of every single historic house going down Walker, basically from Mendenhall all the way down to the dumpster. And I highly encourage you to go out and look at it from that vantage point, so you'll see what I'm saying. So we would like to encourage either a continuance of this, so you can have, the applicant can have more of a chance to explain how that screening would work, to screen that view, or denial or recommendations. I think that's all.
Thank you. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers in opposition?
I'm sorry.
You'll give us your name and address for the record?
My name is Lana Kasabi.
My address is 6091 Windsor Farm Road, Summerfield, 27358. And we own 620 Walker, which is located on this site of where the proposed site is. I just want to add a couple of quick points for the commission to consider. One is safety. We have in the past, in the recent past, had to cut down all of our hedging at Wafco Mills because of transients living in our hedges. Of course, that's a whole other problem, but we literally had to make a decision as a board and as a community to protect our folks from random people, safety issues. So that is a huge consideration. The second thing is we closed the screening that you saw in the first pictures, the hedges, we closed that off because so many people were coming through that gate. There is actually still a gate. We haven't done anything about it. We've let the hedges overgrow. Think about the hedges are probably about maybe this tall, and you're looking at a 22-foot structure that you're gonna have to screen. So just understand that area has been an area of difficulty and of accessibility. Literally anybody can access it. The dumpsters across historic Wafco that we've worked with, that we had a plan to work with, which was gonna be for screening and moving and with the greenway coming through, they are not desirable, but any dumpster will become that because of the fact that you cannot control what people do at 3 o'clock in the morning. They know there's a dumpster, they're gonna come put their, items there. So that's the whole reason behind trying to come up with alternative locations and receptacles versus dumpsters. The other thing that I wanted to know was this, I believe, we were here at the last meeting and the board was tasked with, or the Historic Preservation Committee this was given a continuance based on information coming back with alternatives. And we got a notice a couple of weeks later that the application was resubmitted, but no other information was given to them. We had no other information as a resident. So I just wanted, I felt like that wasn't followed properly, whether that fell, not sure what happened, but we were supposed to have come back with, and those have since come up at the town hall meeting which was held on September 14th, valet, one of them being like a valet service that would service our community, these locations that we could corral, many things were discussed as owners, but I'm just wanting to relay that, which I don't know if that matters, but I was under the impression as an owner that this board was to come, address it after the alternatives were brought in front of you. So, not so, I remember it was like a longer continuance or something. So, but I would ask that you look at the many options that are out there and many pros and cons of both sides, but understand that it is a very, it's very much, our community is really just discussing this. And we had our first discussion and we have our annual meeting in November. And so all of these options will be brought forth at that time for them to decide. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do quickly just want to show, so the additional information that was provided that's been available online is, so this is the new letter that was provided on September 6th as a result of the commission's request, along with the color-coded map that we were looking at earlier that the applicant was describing. So that is the additional documentation that was provided to the commission per the request from last month's meeting.
This is actually calling out.
Just to build off of Stephanie's comment as well, commissioners, I think it's important to bear in mind that, when we continue an item, we're continuing it so that we can have more testing. It's about what is brought before you, the content of the questions or conversations that may be happening outside of here are just not relevant to what we're tasked with deciding. If those conversations are not going the way folks want to go, that's unfortunate. But again, the continuance is to be able to be in receipt of additional evidence in this room, and that's where your decision has to be built on.
It's definitely,
Can I respond to
yeah, you'll have a chance to rebut in just a minute. Sharon had a question about this drawing. This is the first drawing from the original package, and I'm wondering if you could go to it on your slide deck, if you might have it in
Yes,
color.
What is?
Keep going up.
Number 5.
Yeah, slide number
Okay.
5. Okay, and we were wondering, if you know the answer to this, or we can ask the applicant. Sharon noticed that there are a couple of references to color. It says doors, pink, enclosure, and blue.
I think that's what the color marker is.
It's like the color you
Okay.
that was referencing the map that I color coded to show you, like, these things were the ones that were considered.
Okay.
So
Okay,
that you could direct the color coding.
Because this was given last month, and we didn't have a color coded map.
No,
So that's why I was asking, were these notes to color selections, or were they something else?
we are
Because it was
not
unclear.
painting anything orange, yellow, or.
and you can come back up here.
That'll be fine.
Yeah, you can come back up and give your statements.
I just quickly want to make sure we're done with, have we asked if there's any more opposition testimony?
Yeah, are there any others to speak in opposition?
Okay, so
Okay,
then
all
we
right,
can do a
thank you.
rebuttal.
Okay, so, yeah, thank you.
We have thought of, we have really done a significant amount we have spent a significant amount of time considering all the possible, every possible option that we have available on the property. We do plan on having a significant amount of screening. We want it to look nice. We have had to look at the dumpsters over at Historic Wafco for decades, and we want it to look really nice. Nobody wants trash by their house ever. We considered a valet service. I have contacted 4 different valet companies, and so far the only ones that I've heard responding are ones that need to have a place on site to take the trash to. They will valet your trash from your front door or your patio or wherever the designated spot, but they need a place on that site to put that trash. I am still waiting for 2 different vendors to respond to the request for the quote, and I'm hoping that maybe of those 2 vendors, possibly there's an option for someone to take the trash off-site. I don't have that option as of right now, and so based on what we have seen, we have to pursue something that's a more permanent solution for housing our garbage at Wafco. And we feel that this is the best possible place. We do realize that it is visible only, from Mendenhall looking down. Every other location that is like on the edge of our property would be visible to far greater, far more eyes than this location. Because of where we are putting it very far back, on the side of a building with a hedge that is currently very mature and established. We will let that hedge possibly grow taller. We will have plantings. We want it to look very nice. We want it to be a secure place. We do not have any desire to have it, we want people to feel safe going to put their trash away. That is, Wafco is very conscientious, and when we had people that were owners saying, hey, these hedges are getting really big, I'm scared about somebody hiding in the hedges. We have cut them back, and they needed to be pruned, and we did a very hard prune to get them to a state so that people would feel safe about not having somebody. We're, trying to do the best that we can so that people are feeling safe, and we are going to continue to operate that way. We're listening to the owners, and 4 out of the 5 board members are in agreement with the the information that we have shared with you about this being the best location.
May I just ask a general question? So attendance here, just as a commissioner, to me is very important. I've missed 2 meetings in my tenure thus far. Unfortunately, last meeting was an excused absence for me. I had hoped to be able to read the minutes, but understandably, they weren't available, but I wanted to train myself up on the discussion from last meeting and just wasn't able to do that. And I just wanted to ask a general question, hopefully to help me understand something that I just saw in his testimony as it relates to what we're talking about. So is it okay just to ask a general question since I wasn't here last meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so I think it's always important to understand when you're looking at solutions, what is the problem from which we are needing to find a solution? I've walked this district so many times. I'm very, very familiar with this area in depth. I don't understand. Is the current situation that the receptacles, the bins that are picked up regularly, trash and recycling, are they lined up in those 2 parking spaces as we saw in his testimony with his photographs? And if so, why is that not sufficient for services? That's my question.
Okay, so currently we have, we have recycling and trash cans at the end of this building. Right. Sorry, it's all turned around. Okay, so currently there's trash cans and recycling cans right here. They're in the photo. It did not show, but there's a window on the side of this building. It's one of the few buildings. There's only a couple of buildings in Wafco that have a window on the side. That's one of the ones that has a side window. And additionally, there is plumbing lines, of which I think that at some point we submitted one of the drawings that included the plumbing. There's like there's plumbing that is running under here.
You mean like an easement? Like a water easement or wastewater easement? Is that what you're referencing?
No, it's not, I don't know, because I'm not a plumber. I just know that there's some utilities running under the parking lot in this area that we also had some concerns about the trash dumpsters being on that particular. This also would take up, right now, we don't have 66 cans out there. We don't have 66 trash cans and 66 recycling cans. We have significantly fewer. And we have one of the board members who was here the last time, he's also in agreement that this is the best possible site. He is maintaining this area on the daily because we have people who are not breaking down their cardboard, and we have people who are not willing to put their trash bags in the can. And so we're having to do a significant amount of maintenance via volunteer to keep that particular area tidy. And we don't have the full use of all those spaces because we have some structural brickwork going on that the vendor is staging some of those spaces with their like construction needs. If we had more cans, it may be a little bit easier over there for people to find an empty can to put their trash in. It's a significantly larger space if we are going to build an enclosure there to screen those trash cans and recycling cans.
Yeah, and if I could maybe restate some things and correct me if I restated incorrectly that you mentioned last week. I think the reason why I understood you all are in search of a new solution is number one, that you used to have access to the historic Wafco dumpsters. You no longer have that access. And number two, you stated about the individual trash cans that was kind of your next step after you lost access to those dumpsters, but these units were not designed with the consideration of screening individual trash cans, which, you know, if we go back to the standards, one of the requirements for trash receptacles is that they be screened. So my understanding of this application is it's an attempt to address that issue, because right now they're just all sitting out in the parking lot.
So,
Yes,
but
and
it's,
it's
okay,
significant amount of volunteer hours to maintain that area every single day.
well, and of course, we all resonate with that. I mean, I walk College Hill Historic District every day, and I've started carrying a trash pickup arm because it just takes a village
Yes,
to deal with
yes.
the problems of trash, which are a constant. I would just, did you, so understanding that a certain number of cans can be accommodated currently in the 2 parking spaces where they, again, currently are, affecting one potential homeowner with 1 window. Not that that person's necessarily gonna be looking out that 1 window all the time. You do have, with the set down here along McGee Street, those homes, the townhomes there, that whole two sets there that back up to, well, sorry.
Okay, so if we
Sorry,
put
Fulton.
dumpsters here, it would be far more visible.
No,
If we put
no.
dumpster, this is historic Wafco right here, so we can't obviously put dumpsters there. This is where the dumpsters that historic Wafco has that are trashy mess.
Yeah.
And if we put dumpsters here, this would also, like back here, there are some utility, like big boxes and stuff.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, thank you for that. I wasn't actually referencing the dumpsters. I was still
Oh.
talking about just the regular trash.
Okay.
What I was saying is, and I'm wondering if you considered, I believe that you actually could augment your existing number of cans with.
I just don't think that's what we're here to talk about. Our job is not to talk about what is the best way for Wafco Mills condominiums to collect their trash. Like, that is not our business. You know, and I think that as far as the standards are concerned, you know, the standards reference both trash receptacles and dumpsters as acceptable methods of trash collection in the historic district, and our job is to decide whether a proposed use meets the standards that govern those uses. It's not for us to figure out whether they should use trash cans rather than dumpsters. I don't think there's any possibility of us having a productive conversation about that topic.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So with that, I think that we should, we'll turn it over to the commissioners for discussion and,
Close the public.
yeah, so close the public hearing. Yeah, and I think just to think about what we're charged with is this application, and the question is, does this application meet the design standards? We have the options of approval, denial, approval with conditions, or continuance. So we chose to continue it at the last meeting because we felt like there was not adequate information in the application for us to make that decision. So I think question number 1 for us to consider is, do we now have all the information that we need in order to answer, does the proposed application meet the design standards or not? And if we do have enough information to make that decision, then we need to discuss the particulars of how the application does or does not conform to the standards.
Trash is an ugly situation, no matter where it is. I think what's currently going on with the mills is actually uglier than this. And I believe that it does meet the criteria. with that, if it's screening with the conditions, I think maybe more conditions on, I do agree. That a visual mural or something, I'd probably force that into the conditions. Would be good on there again to screen that. If you look from Mendenhall Street down that hill. It's not the most gorgeous idyllic view of Greensboro. There's no pastoral view. It's a underpass, overpass, a building. There's Wafco dumpsters are partially visible from that area. I'd be fine with this being there more than trash cans, dumpsters, and other things. That's my opinion.
So personally, when we look at the standards from page 26, number 1. Place miscellaneous items such as swimming pools, playground equipment, concrete pads and basketball goals, tree houses, dumpsters, and trash receptacles only in areas such as rear yards where they are not visible from the street. I think the design that is being proposed in this COA application is in direct conflict with that standard. It's completely and totally visible from the street. Number 2, trash receptacle and dumpster areas must be adequately screened from view of the public right of way and adjoining residences, excuse me, with shrubs and or fencing. I believe that that will be almost impossible to, I didn't see, and let me know if I'm missing it, I don't see a planting diagram or anything that's been presented here with the COA application that illustrates what that screening is going to look like. And I think that that would be something I would like to have brought back to us for consideration because it's important. The other thing that really bothers me about this, again, I appreciate all the efforts that have been undertaken to get to this point, is the scale. When we look at that diagram and we see the scale of what this will be, it's going to be completely visible from on the other side of the hedges. It's going to be visible from the street. I would actually respectfully offer that the view from Mendenhall down this stretch of Walker Avenue is one of the most charming sets of streetscapes within the College Hill Historic District, with some of the most exquisitely maintained Queen and Victorians and other styles of homes. And that this at that scale, again, we just don't have any sense of what that would look like with screening. I think it would actually be a blight. I think it would not be historically appropriate at all at that scale, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do think that's a fair point, that we do not have any landscape drawings to consider. That's something that Sharon had mentioned to me, and I do agree that that's an important point, considering that we only have two standards to base our decision off of, one of which deals with screening, and we don't really have any concrete information on what that proposed screening is.
And
So-
on that note, it would have to be put where there's currently asphalt. And
Right.
so how's, if I'm looking at the drawings correctly, so.
Yeah. So I think that,
There's a crepe myrtle tree and 2 other trees right where they're already partially screened. Is what I see on the map. If you look at this map right here, these trees already exist. The crepe myrtle tree is giant. That's where this would be. So just, I know what you're saying. There should be a landscaping plan. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think,
But just before you say it's not asphalt, it's pure ground. That's where they're.
I know what you're referencing, but it's not both sides.
Yeah.
It's also a really tight constrained space, and what they're dealing with now are not lined up recycling and trash cans. I drove over last month to do some due diligence, and they're just scattered in those parking space areas. And it feels that neither option is good. There's one that I think is better, and that is the enclosed space. It's tidier, it's neater, but it needs more design work. I think it needs a landscaping plan. I think it needs to fit in better with the architecture, if that's even possible. But this is a multi-family place that is really constrained in what you can do, and if we're talking about views and visibility and beauty of streetscapes, that's important. But if you just expand the lens a little wider, you're looking at a half a parking lot full of scattered random trash cans with cardboard that's not being broken down and bag trash that doesn't make it inside. I think that's worse. And I think the options that we've seen no other options, so we can't consider them. The options that we've seen tonight and last month are very clear, and they all have pluses and minuses. And I think it would be helpful to make some kind of decision with conditions if we are able to do that tonight.
I mean, I just say one thing about that though, like, and I hear you. Of course, you did your field research, but that gets into something that's not part of this COA application, which is you've got HOA management companies, you've got homeowners associations that can impose rules, okay? And,
Well,
but that gets into something, but that's like, so.
can we keep it to what is in the application there? And I mean, we can, if there. Yeah, I mean, this is tricky, and like I said, I agree with the comments about needing more information about the landscape screening. I think that's an important piece of information that in many ways will make or break this application that we don't have. But what I would like for the commission to discuss right now, so that we can have another step forward, whatever that is how the constraints of this particular site interact with the wording in standard number 1 about, well, really in those standards where it references dumpsters and trash receptacles to be placed in areas such as rear yards. So it's not necessarily saying it has to be in a rear yard. It's just saying such as rear yards where they are not visible from the street. They must be adequately screened from view of the public right of way, which again, you know, that's our job to interpret what does adequately mean, what does screening consist of. Neither of those things are specified. But I think the point I wanted to make, and what I've been thinking about all along as I look at this site plan, is we've got to think about what is front, what is rear on this site, what is public. Those things don't line up neatly, and that's why I made the comment at the beginning about, you know, to me this standard seems like it was written more in view of a traditional single family lot setup where you have a house fronting the street and a rear yard. We don't have that here, and from what I'm hearing, some of the conflict from the neighbors is that, you know, while the proposed location is, in my mind, needs some of this wording in that, you know, if it was placed and oriented the way that it's shown on the drawings, it's screened pretty well from the public rights of way. It's screened from Cedar Street. The flip side of that is it's right at the front doors of multiple units, which is challenging. And also, you know, we heard testimony about, you know, that dumpster enclosure, you know, kind of would terminate a long view down a street. And so that's tricky. That's very tricky. So I think my point is we have some words that are in conflict. This concept of screened from the public way versus location in a rear yard, and it seems like we can't have both in this place. So maybe we ought to think about, you know, is there a more primary consideration on this specific site?
I would just expand on what you're saying, that when I see the drawing and I see the hedge with the brick columns from the Cedar Street side and see that there's a good amount of distance in the trees behind that, it certainly seems like this location is screened from the Cedar Street side. The side that we've seen many times with the two car dealerships seems reasonable to me. I think the height issue, the 9 feet is a concern. And I don't think the 9 feet will be a concern from the Cedar Street side because it's so far back and there's those trees. But perhaps there could be some screening on the other side that would help to, I mean, we still gotta get the doors open and everything, but it seems like if there was a landscape plan or a plan that was worked out with staff, that minimize more that, the volume of the container, or enclosure, because when I see that side with 2 cars there, that's not exciting to see, you know, and so I think there's a volume to this that needs to be visually minimized. So in answer to what you're saying, I would agree that the public right of way of Cedar Street, that this is not intruding on it. And I understand that there's a lot of issue about Walker Avenue suddenly no longer being a street, and that there is a view down to it, but the view down to it now is of the 2-car parking space. So.
Yeah.
Stephanie, is there any way you could pull up the street view of Cedar Street looking at that? I know you've got a slide, but I'd like to be able to kind of look left and right.
Yeah, let me just, it's easier for me to work off the monitor. You like Google Street View, right? Okay.
And the other thing is when you look at the site plan and the proposed placement of the enclosure, yes, those units that are to the side of it that would kind of front it, the enclosure is not directly in front of those units. It's kind of off to the side of it. So it's not like, even though it would be in their front yard, it's not smack in the front yard.
Yeah, and unfortunately, from a real estate standpoint, that's not gonna be great for their valuations as the owners. You know, it's.
Well, unfortunately, that's not in our purview.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
I mean, it's not, I mean, it's kind of off to the side. Yes, it's in the front, but it's not directly in the front. When you look at the placement of it.
And I will say, I think with the landscaping planning,
It would
They're gonna-
soften it, it would soften.
well, it sure would, but they're gonna have to reconcile a couple of different things. They're gonna have to reconcile that the hedges have been kept lower and also allowed to grow together from a safety standpoint that's been communicated. So,
I mean, I totally agree with you, and safety is primary, but again, it doesn't, we can't look at safety, there's so much we can't look at that's in this. We can't look at safety.
it's. Yeah,
And then
Again,
if
that's
you
not-
want me to
that wasn't
Okay,
my
yeah,
idea, that was me.
You're in a good spot. Can you,
Yeah.
can you pan so we can see more to the right, so we can see the units there on the right? Okay, yeah, that's good. Still see more colors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also go on the other side, Jesse,
Yeah,
can we go to the 2 cars, and is there a chance definitely to go right over there? You probably have to remap around the whole.
I
Town.
have to drive around, but that's fine.
We'll go through the Stevens and Spring Garden.
Check that movie.
Well,
It's free.
Thank God.
Let's see, Google Maps.
Oh. Geez.
It won't let me go down there.
No, it didn't.
It-
Back there.
Is it, because it's a dead end street, it won't go down that.
Yeah, oh, really?
It's technically, is that technically a condemned street, no through street? So with that, because there's a speed bump there, I don't think that's even code in the city, you can't put speed bumps on that street.
That's correct.
It's over. That's
Yeah, so that is Wafco Mills property right there.
Mhm.
yeah.
Let me quickly just go back to the presentation because I thought that I had an image for last month. That, wait a minute, that's what in the world, that's the wrong month. I thought there was an image there that showed that side. Because and it's not as good as I thought. I had taken a picture that showed these units a little bit more, and they do have front stoops, front entrances and stoops on that side.
Yeah.
And one of the points coming out of last month's meeting is there's really no backyard, and talking about those standards and that number one standard where, rear yards. There's no rear yard at Wafco, so we're really kind of dealing with an unusual circumstance, and I'll just reflect back to my own time where I lived in an apartment complex. And the dumpster was in an enclosure next to my building, and it was in the center of the whole complex. So there's, that's one of the reasons why we showed those initial images in the earlier presentation of other multifamily properties in the districts, and just it's as I think Bert said earlier, trash is an ugly subject, but we've got to figure out a solution, and I don't think there is a perfect solution in this case.
Yeah, would you mind driving us back around to the first location? Cause, it seems like we're maybe a little bit stuck here, and so I wanna get
Sorry, close your eyes.
the commission's thoughts on, and I think this idea was even brought up last month. And that is, what would be the implications if this enclosure was in the same location but was turned so that the doors faced onto Cedar Street? Because if you'll go back to that perspective where we were, I mean, those are kind of the backs of the units that have driveways facing Cedar Street. And, for myself, I'm satisfied that if a dumpster is to be built, that this proposed location is really the only place that it fits. But I just wonder if turning the orientation, that would allow for landscaping to be screened, screen this enclosure from the view of all of the units. And to me, then what we have to say is okay, well, if you do that, yes, it's more of an impact on the view from the public way of Cedar Street, but then that goes back to the question of adequate screening. It would still have doors on that side.
It's a level change.
That did come up on the last meeting, I believe, and the problem is, I don't know for sure, is there is an easement problem on turning that around onto Cedar.
Right.
So.
Would you mind coming up and speaking to that?
Chair, do you think the extra information is?
I think it would be relevant.
Yeah.
So we did, this location, originally, that's what I wanted. I wanted the dumpsters or the enclosure to be facing out towards Cedar, so that then the trash truck just drives up, picks it up, dumps it, and runs along their merry way. And we could close it, and it would, it would be screened on the inside, it would, whatever. There's too much utility stuff going on in here that we would have to break the curb and it was prohibitive we weren't able to get the utilities moved so that we could have that. But if somebody else has some ways to get those utilities moved and we could get that location so that we could open up those doors up onto Cedar, that would be fabulous.
So it's prohibitive from a cost perspective or from a feasibility?
Like getting all those, because there's this pole right here, there's behind here, there is behind this hedge, it's a storm basin.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And AT&T lines, and there's a big box of stuff that's.
But perhaps it could be turned the other way I think the idea of having it, whatever is facing down Walker, what you see, have that front or what that facade be stationary and have screening there. And then either have, I know it'd be trickier for the, well, that's not gonna work.
So it's different, yeah.
We're the front, yeah, so you're opening it from this side.
Right.
So
Commissioners, I think that you need to either decide to continue this and ask them to, you know, there's been a lot more discussion again. I hate to keep bumping things along, but you do have that. I think it's 160 days. You can continue it without the applicant's approval or permission. So are these questions that you want looked into and researched more? Can that dumpster be reoriented to be addressed by a dump truck? I don't know why I keep saying dump truck, a trash truck, from a different vantage point. Can the height of the enclosure be reduced so that it doesn't have as much impact? What are some of the other things that we've been hearing tonight?
And then the landscaping plan.
You know, this is a complicated project. I normally do not like continuing and continuing and continuing. And I used to kind of push back on Mike a lot on multiple continuances, like, let's get it cleared up, let's just not even talk about it until we have more information. But I think a lot more has come out tonight, really, than what we were even looking at from last month from a design standpoint. But it's not this group's job to figure out what that design needs to look at. It's really the applicant's job to hear what you all are saying, our concerns, and go back to the drawing board and try to address those concerns.
Right.
We have considered it's not feasible to have that turned around and have the doors opening out onto Cedar and to break through this hedge and brickwork and have them open up onto Cedar. It's not feasible. We did pursue that in the beginning due to the utilities and easements and things
Okay.
going on, that it was
Right.
it wasn't.
And you can see the utilities, I mean, there's a, yeah.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate that testament. That's helpful. Okay, so I think given all that, then the question, and to go to secondly's question about continuance versus making a decision tonight, I think we're, you know, we can eliminate that alternative, and then the question becomes, we're missing any concrete information on landscaping. We have questions about the scale of this enclosure, and I would say for myself, you know, scale meaning more height than anything. I think the length and width are kind of fixed dimensions that are necessary for this, but questions about the overall height. And so I think the question for you commissioners is, do you feel like you need a continuance so that those questions can be answered and information presented to us? Or do you feel like you can make a decision on the application based on what we have before us? One way or the other.
I do think that, but my question is, can we put in the COA that we are inclined to approve the location, but it all hinges on the questions that we have as conditions?
I really would prefer that we do a continuance, I'm sorry, but I think that would be appropriate.
And so, of course, a continuance is an option. Another option would be to approve it conditionally. Those items could come back to staff, noting that just because it comes back to staff doesn't mean that staff approves it. If we have concerns with it, it comes back to the commission, or we work with the applicant to create something. I have already said to Brent, I don't want it to come to staff. I just don't want to make that decision. We'll just hire the new person and I'll get that to make that decision. So, but I will do that if that's the choice that you make, and I'll work with, I mean, if you want to, do you want to create a little subgroup to talk through this. We've done that in previous situations.
I was actually thinking, I was like, I would like to have a continuous, because the more I think about this, the more complicated it is, but the more it could be really an opportunity for this community to make something pretty that does have that view and riff on that architecture. It might cost some money, but these homeowners over here are willing to pay if something's attractive. So I would like to continue it. And I would like the subgroup. I mean,
Right,
usually on
and we
it.
can do that. I mean, we've done that. We work with like we pull together 3 members of this. I mean, this is what we've done in the past. We pulled together 3-ish. I think we've even had 4 in some cases. I feel like that's pushing it a little too far, but if we have 2 or 3 commissioners that would be willing to participate on a subcommittee to talk through design issues with this, that's one avenue, as long as our legal counsel, not to put you on the spot, agrees with that. It is consistent to what we've done over the
I
years.
think it is an opportunity. It's a good opportunity to do something really beautiful.
Oh, we've done it midway. Yeah, like we come and we realize it's a bigger and more complex situation and we create a subcommittee. But in the meantime, the COA is stagnant. There's no, like, it stays off the agenda until the subcommittee works through the issues. And some property owners meet with the subcommittee and choose to completely ignore what the subcommittee recommends. So it's not binding, it's more like a customer service offer. That's a great idea.
It's illegal.
You can blame it on
It's
me.
illegal.
You can blame it on me.
It's an option.
Okay,
It's an
before we make a motion there, can we talk, one thing we have not talked about at any point in this process is the actual design of the enclosure itself, and I've heard some people make reference to the aesthetics of that, so I'd be curious to hear you guys expand on your thoughts on that.
It's a little round.
I didn't know, yeah, I didn't know if that was in the purview where we were talking about necessarily, but yeah, I think the more I look at this, the more I think it is grim.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if you couldn't take that brick architecture and riff on it, and like, there's so many garages in College Hill that are brick, that are kind of behind things, that are still in side yards, public view, areas like that. Could you make something that riffs on the architecture? That's what you guys are here for, not me. But I wonder if that could be the opportunity that you're looking for, that, you know. Cause you do get lost in the weeds of this project. This project is, I don't wish it on anybody, and I have trust in what they do. So, yeah, I mean, you're, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we have some couple thoughts. Any other thoughts on the design?
I'm kind of in agreement there, just that there possibly be some combination of brick and wood. For the enclosure that would mimic the.
We might be compromised on the brick because might be a touchy thing, but we always have to discuss something.
But I think that's actually a really great suggestion, because the applicants had made reference to wanting it to be in keeping with the overall design of that section of Wafco, and really more than what we're seeing here, something like a combination of wood and brick would, I think, be more in keeping with that overall look and feel of that section of the neighborhood.
I would just say that it seems like our 2 options are continue it or add conditions. And I feel like if we add conditions, I don't know that that's gonna resolve things. I think that there is a design review subcommittee that can work with the applicant or work with the neighborhood association. That might be the more productive way. And I do agree, we all recognize this is an issue whenever you have apartment buildings, and that if this can be used as a way to show, you really can come up with something that works better, then I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is an important conversation to have. I definitely sense everybody moving towards continuing this again, and I would agree with that, but I think to make that continuance important, we need to kind of get some clear direction on the outstanding issues that need to be resolved.
Definitely
The continuous clock, you said we had how many?
It's 160 days.
When did it start? Did it
So-
start when it was
so
first
we
presented?
Well, when does that start? From the date of receipt?
Does it start, from the first continuance?
No, maybe it might start from the August 28th hearing. I'm not sure.
The original.
Yeah.
And we should also, it would be good to check in with the applicant and their feelings on, right now, we're just discussing, making sure that having a subcommittee is something that they would even participate in. If we can offer it to them, they can decline working through that process, or they can welcome working through that process.
Right, that's not something we need to address in our motion there, right? That could be.
Well, I think we would talk about it right now,
Okay.
and then.
Yeah, I guess my thought on the matter would be, while the board certainly could go ahead and continue, I think it does make sense to ask the parties, if they would be amenable to what the intention is, otherwise they may be going down a path that's not gonna get much better.
And I think too, we would work in a timely manner.
Of course, we're gonna work with you.
Yeah.
Of course, we want it to be beautiful. We want brick. We want it to look exactly like it blends in with Wafco. We do. There's an easement that's there that is, we were told by the city that we couldn't put something that was a permanent structure there because of the easement.
At the proposed site.
Yes.
a lot of options, we're willing to work.
We're willing to work with whatever a committee tells, there's recommendations.
Well, it sounds to me too, like one of the things that our committee could help facilitate is bringing in these other parties from the city. And us all sitting down at the table together. I think that's a lot more productive than this back and forth. Cause I think, I think different departments within the city
Yes.
tend to just look at their narrow focus and, perhaps a meeting where all the issues could be considered together might be more productive.
Right, because one of the things you're saying, the city said you couldn't be anything permanent there, but your drawings call for 8-inch slab.
Yes. and
So that's a contradiction.
Well, they said that we could do the concrete slab, but that if they need to access that easement, that we will have to replace the concrete slab.
Okay, so we should look at the calendar and and this is Brent's recommendation, is put a time frame for going the subcommittee route. When do we want some finalized decisions on a proposal to come back to the commission? So we have our October meeting, which is only a month away. And then we do not have a November meeting because of Thanksgiving. So then the next meeting, I think, I don't know off the top of my head, it will either be December 4th or December 11th. We always hold it early in December, and then we do not have an end of December meeting because of Christmas holiday and New Year's and other winter holidays.
So, and Stephanie, just to clarify, so the 160-day period starts from the first date of hearing of the COA application, which
Did we
was
just figure that out?
August?
Well, under statute, you are talking about the date of the application.
So that would be date of receipt then.
Yeah.
Okay, so the date of receipt on this one is July 25th. So let's look at our calendar.
Is 160 the right number?
160 days, yes. It used to be less than that. And I finally got it in my head that it's 160. So July. Wait, am I saying 160 and it's really 180?
Well, that's what's happening.
I'm wrong, because for some reason I can't get that figure in my head.
So it's 180.
So it's 180 then, if that's what
So
state law.
December would work,
It's
right?
a 6-month window.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
I was working really hard to get that in my brain and clearly didn't even get it right.
So part of it is we're gonna need to figure out too, which members of the city staff, which departments we need to meet with.
Well, and I've got
Potentially.
documentation from all of the communication that everybody has had, so I can pull all of them in. So that we have everybody
Perfect.
together, because I don't think that's happened. We've got a couple of different conversations taking place and we can pull everybody together. And the reality is we have to come up with a solution here. You know, everybody agrees that what's happening right now is, it's not desirable. So we gotta figure out what to do with the trash, so.
So-
Yeah, we'll just work through that.
And we're down to 120 days, right? So 4 months, and certainly, hopefully it wouldn't take us that long.
So we just need this December meeting, this is.
And
December
yeah,
meeting.
we should have something by December's meeting, right?
I'm-
Bert, are you gonna?
I'm a college kid first.
I know you are.
Yeah.
Make a decision.
It is closed.
Continuance,
I mean,
right?
we were just talking about this earlier today that we're.
When is your next-
Seeing all these folks together.
We had one, okay.
In November.
We don't have a date.
Okay, just sometime in November.
Yes.
Okay.
We just had, we had a town hall meeting a week ago, 2 weeks ago, it was at the, we met here. And we just had, it has to do, it was very general, and we're just there.
Is there something, particular testimony that you would like to share? I'm not sure what they're talking about. Okay, so I think we're close to being able to take some action. So let me just kind of summarize everything that I'm hearing. So I'm hearing from the commission that the commission would like to continue this application. The specific issues, the reason for continuance is we feel like we don't have enough information in front of us tonight to make a decision on whether this application meets or does not meet the design standards. The specific issues that we want more information on are, number one, a drawing, a landscape plan for proposed landscape screening around the structure. Question number two is regards to the scale of the enclosure and specifically the height, and whether it may be possible to reduce the currently proposed 9-foot height. And then I think the third issue that I've heard come up regards the specific design of the enclosure and materials. I think commissioners have expressed a concern that the design is maybe a little bit too Spartan, utilitarian, however you want to describe it. We've heard some testimony that there are some easement issues. So one of our goals in this process is to get whatever relevant people from other city departments that have jurisdiction over those easements, and also if there are conflicts with utilities. We've heard AT&T, we don't know if there are any power issues. We just need to kind of get all those people together. I think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong on this point, I feel like we've kind of settled on that the proposed location is really the only feasible location for this project. So we're thinking more in terms of mitigation. And you know, making this the best design that we can. So so all those are the issues that need to be resolved. We heard, or I heard the HOA has an annual meeting coming up sometime in November. They don't have a date set, but sometime in November. So I would propose then that we should maybe aim to not hear this again until that early December meeting. That'll give a lot more time for these things to be worked out, time for additional conversations to be had within the homeowners association. And so therefore my hope is that when we come back here in early December, we have a more refined plan that also has better support. All right. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to continue this till the early December meeting.
Okay.
And
Do you need to add to it? To have some-
I was gonna do a second motion, but I don't know, I could make a motion with that.
Well, I'll second your first motion.
You could just say the December meeting.
Yeah.
Did you? I didn't.
Yeah.
We're too busy talking.
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion, we continue this item, application number 2941 for the early December meeting.
Okay,
Perfect, thank you.
And I
Second.
seconded it.
all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I make a second motion that a subcommittee be formed, pulling in relevance, historic preservationists, board members and city staff and relevant people to study this issue, possibly with the homeowner association and their design committee.
And so would we like to have volunteers from the commission, 2 to 3 individuals that would be willing to work on this?
I'm glad to volunteer for that. I believe Bert said he would be willing to also.
But I'm willing to give my spot up to anybody who has more, who has more relevant experience, anybody who is in architecture and design.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Right,
I mean, we have people here who have,
We draw on some of our design people,
Yeah.
please.
you shouldn't have local hotheads on committee.
People have spoken, Sharon.
People
People have spoken.
Do we have volunteers? And we also have Tracy, who is an architect who's not here tonight, and we could also ask him. We can technically have up to 4,
Sharon and Arlen, and we can ask Tracy for that.
and then not you.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to vote on this, not
That's in the enabling legislation somewhere, right?
Or if Tracy is unable to participate,
I would do that.
with Bert as an
Yes.
alternate then.
I'll keep it.
So if someone other than Bert could make someone other than Bert, Sharon, or Arlen, make a motion to create a subcommittee to explore design options for application number, where is it? 2941. With Arlen Nichols, Sharon Graber, and Tracy Pratt, and Bert Vanderveen as an alternate. And you can just say, repeat that.
I thought Bert was willing to do it. Could Bert be the alternate?
We can do that.
Yeah, I hesitate on Tracy just because he wasn't here for all this discussion tonight.
Okay.
So Tracy's the alternate, and then I will reach
I
out
would
to
even
him.
be the alternate if Bert can't do it.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
I'm a little worried about my.
So how about if we do this? How about if I send out an email to you all? And can we have a volunteer discussion via email, since it's not a quasi judicial decision?
We would still have an issue.
Let's just.
Let's just do it. Let's do it now. I think we've got the 3 of us.
Yeah,
right?
three, I think is good.
And then we can have Joe as the alternate.
Right.
I'm not.
And just
looking-
forget Tracy.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Giving Tracy.
Okay, Arlen, Sharon, and, wait, right,
Bert.
Arlen, Sharon, and Bert with Joe and.
Joe is the alternate.
And the only reason we need an alternate, the only reason I was suggesting that is if we were reaching out to Tracy and Tracy didn't wanna do it. So we don't really need it.
We don't want to do it.
We don't really need
Okay.
that to do
All
it.
right, how about just the 3 of us?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Alright,
All right,
so what I said a moment ago with Arlen Nichols, Sharon Graber, and Bert Vanderveen. And so then we would need a second.
Second.
all right,
I'm gonna give it to Eric.
all right, all those in favor say aye. All right, so that item is continued until the December meeting. And I'll look forward to a positive resolution.
Okay.
All right, thank you all.
And thank you all for your patience.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so that was our last COA application. Next items from the commission chairman. I don't have anything to share other than that it's strange looking over and seeing Stephanie here, but it's a lot easier to see your hand waving right there.
Be up here, I have
And it's nice to know that Mike is using his free time to text you.
Hilarious, I have to say, like, I'm really like, I love him to death, and I really am like really happy that he's reaching out to me, because it made me sad to see him go, and I like being able to bounce ideas off of him unofficially.
Yes.
I attended training last Friday in
Yes.
Durham. It was awesome. I got to meet Stephen Lee's equivalent for the city of High Point.
And who was that?
I have to pull her name out of some information.
I can't.
She's
think of
really
her name.
young. And make,
Is that, I think I'm thinking of.
young and blonde. I'm quiet,
Is it Emily, is that her first name?
something like that.
Just curious.
And a gentleman that's on the Guilford County Historic Commission, and we were talking, and I have a question. He had the same question. Where are the boundaries drawn between responsibilities in the city of Greensboro when it comes to the Guilford County Historic Commission? What properties in the city do they oversee or do they not?
So this body does not oversee any landmark properties. You have the authority to issue a COA for a landmark property when it's located in a locally zoned historic district. Traditionally, because the county landmark comes with a tax, I don't know what the right word, like rebate, I guess, property tax decrease. Our commission has deferred to the county commission. Just like we will often sometimes defer to the decision of the State Historic Preservation Office in a tax credit review. There's some money there. So if county commission or SHPO says this is the correct choice, we bring that to you all in your decision making. But typically with the landmark property, we allow the county to handle that.
So does the county only oversee landmark properties?
They do have one district, I think that's Oak Ridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
But aren't there, but there are other National Register properties within Guilford County that aren't necessarily under the oversight of the 3 historic districts. So would they, besides landmarks, would they be overseeing those
No, so
No?
neither commission oversees National
Does.
Register properties.
at all?
Okay. So we bring county landmarks when they're being designated within the city of Greensboro boundaries. That does come before this board and it goes to city council for review. And National Register nominations within the city of Greensboro come before this body and then to city council. Like we had 3 last month. But there's no like governance by this board, this commission, I should say, over what happens to those properties until and if they're in the locally zoned boundaries. Just like with county, unless it's a county landmark, even if it's on the National Register, the only reason the county is looking at it is because it's a county landmark.
Okay, so that's, I mean, that was the question, what's the difference between, you know, the two?
So-
And then High Point has their own artists starting their
Like High
own.
Point has their own program, right? And so, Sharon and I were at the last Benbow Road National Register meeting, and Eric as well, on September, I believe that was September 10th. And this was a question that came up a lot from the audience, because there is this fear that with National Register designation, you're bringing on the restrictions that come with this board, which is locally zoned, and that's the difference. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that at that meeting. I was not supposed to speak at all, and I ended up having to speak a lot to talk about the difference between the types of designations, and we said it over and over again because it was a lot of people were really stuck on kind of some level of fear that that's what we were putting in place. But that is the difference. And it seems counterintuitive. You would think national designation would have the higher level of review, but it's actually reversed.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and the city of Greensboro was mentioned a lot in training in Durham due to the South Benbow Road Historic District nomination, the oral histories and the scanning. A lot of the other jurisdictions that were in attendance had questions about how to start that. You know,
Yeah.
there was a legal question from the city of Durham's attorney, so you might wanna reach out to her. I'll find out her name for you. Cause she asked, it was specifically in reference to the releases that get signed by people who do the oral histories and have their documents scanned, as to use. Cause she
Right,
asked
so
if
that's
this-
under the National Park
Right.
Service grant,
Mhm.
and so, Bernita,
But it was the
what's
legal
Bernita's
issue,
last name?
Reed,
Thank you.
Yeah.
She handles all
right?
of that.
But the city attorney for Durham had a question in reference as to if the city attorney from Greensboro had reviewed that document. And, you know, that was,
We hadn't because it's part of the grant, and so that all got approved through the Park Service, the National Park
Yeah.
Service. And I will say, I'm actually in some discussions with a councilwoman from Statesville who I met at that meeting, and she wants some help and guidance on working through some different things. in
there was a
Statesville.
gentleman, a planner from the town of Lewisburg that I put Eric in contact with, cause he had some questions about what Eric did to get South Bimbo started.
Yeah.
So, it was really good, it was well attended, and they got us out on time, we started on time.
It was good. It was a good meeting, and we kind of embarrassed him a little bit.
Yeah.
Gave him some kudos for being the one that kind of started the whole thing, so.
Stephanie, where did things stand with the standards update?
So that's been a little bit put on the back burner right now. And only because, we're at a point where I have to sit down and review the text, and I just haven't had time in the last month. Mike did provide Samantha with his comments before he left, and that's what I need to sit down and take a look at.
So has she mostly finished the initial draft and then
Yeah,
Mike has
this, I mean,
joined in?
it's pretty solid, and a lot of it, there's a lot that's repeats of what we've already had in there. There's some new direction that's in there as well, but I just honestly haven't had enough time to really kind of sit down and read it word for word. I will do that before I do minutes. I can't.
Just so we have the minutes before the December meeting.
Make that happen.
But the trainings are really beneficial, and if any of you ever get a chance to go, you should. It's nice to meet people from other local municipalities.
I'm gonna go to the one in Taylorsville in October. I think
In
there's-
October, okay.
I'm hoping to go to that one, sorry.
There's one coming up in November that I am supposed to present at, and I have to get the details on that, and I'll forward that to you.
Where's that one?
I don't even know, I said I think it's in Raleigh, I need to check on that. I don't think it's been officially announced
Oh, okay,
yet.
well, let us know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if it's in Raleigh, we can always carpool. If I'm going, we can take a city car. It's in November, the week of like the 14th or 15th, I know that. All right, so let me make a note to send out training.
And how was the PGI annual meeting? Did everybody get to go? I'm sorry, I missed it.
So Sharon was there and Eric was there and Mike and his wife Denise took my ticket, so, yeah, cause I couldn't attend last minute.
Good vision for next year, good recap of this year and good vision for next year.
We had a meeting today, board meeting today, and we reviewed the annual meeting. It was well attended. The location was great. I think some really good relationships were formed. And that's one of the keys for any, I guess, nonprofit is to have those relationships to forward the vision. And so, yeah, we went over some pros and cons at today's Zoom meeting. And but yeah, it's a good direction to go forward.
All right, is there anything else from staff? All right, we have no audience left, so.
Legal staff.
Just one.
Legal.
Okay, so two things came up tonight which remind me of the general duty of members of the commission to vote. We had one recusal. And I just want to remind everyone, anytime you think there's a situation where you might want to recuse yourself, give me a shout, let's talk about it. Front end of the meeting is fine, and we'll figure out, if it's a situation where it makes sense to do that, or if it's something where statutorily we might not have grounds to. Secondly, Commissioner Nichols, something that you brought up, with regard to your absence last month, and my apologies for not thinking about that a little bit more on the front end. There is a general duty to vote anytime that you're in attendance, right? Even if you missed a preceding part of the hearing or what have you, but it's contingent upon, being able to accurately say, hey, I've got the information I need to vote. And so if we ever have a situation, I certainly don't think tonight we would have implicated this, but if we ever have a situation where you go, hey, look, I don't have the information I need to make this decision, let's talk about it. That can be grounds to get yourself out of that requirement to vote as well. But again, for tonight, everything went well, and just wanted to flag that. So again,
Yeah.
any concern like that?
We knew that there was going to be a lot of repetitions from what we heard last month, which is why I wasn't too concerned about having the minutes ready.
Exactly, yeah, we were good for tonight.
All right,
Yeah.
somebody move to adjourn.
So.
All right. Second. All in favor?
It's like. It's a big event. Thank you to staff for sticking with us. Thank you, Justin. Half an hour.
Great dumpster
Next time you say this, I'm gonna say it's been a long time, we go chat.
You better. You tell me I should be back.
Well.
So one of the things that I would send you that sort of like.
2 weeks out of restaurant show.
Oh my gosh,
So,
okay.
yeah, and folks,
It'll make it close.
Right, yeah, right now.
Yes, and it takes a little bit, and yeah.
You know, it's like interesting when life works out that way.
I mean, it's minor, so it'll be all right. The company will be fine. I have to go over and see what's going on. I'll never have to get that. Yeah.
All is well. Yeah. But, are you taking up the signs?
Yeah, I'll grab, I'll grab here.
I mean, I can just. Or not.
Oh my goodness. Who is the, what, you know,